Hi everyone and welcome to my review of Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds in 1963. So yes, back again with another Hitchcock review, and here we are with this set, the Masterpiece Collection here on Blu-ray, and yes, this time for one of his later ones. This is the latest Hitchcock film that I've reviewed on the channel, and the one that I've seen. I've not seen any of the other ones after this actually, and yes. This was actually one of the first, Hitchcock films I ever saw. It was one of the original ones, I saw as a kid, along with Psycho, North by Northwest. These were the three that I had seen, many, many years before I started actually digging into, his films properly on Blu-ray and stuff. So yes, it's part of this set, and wonderful, wonderful set this is. It's just one of the best box sets you can get, and actually I picked it up for very, very cheap, when I got this a couple of years ago, and it's never been really reduced as much since. So yes, this film very, very divisive. It's a film that it's got a 7.7 on IMDb. It's very, very. Some people don't like this film at all. Some people hate this film, but others love it. And yes, again, excuse. I do actually have a really, really bad cold and a cough and stuff. So if I do, I will have to, of course, cough in the video, but that's because I am actually quite unwell, but should be better, over the next few days. But yes, thought I'd carry on with the reviews, of course, because I've got so many this week. Of course, yes, this week I will be, reviewing some more of my favourite films. So yes, The Birds is one of them. This is a film, that I've never quite got, how it's so, unpopular at times. Personally, I think. It's one of the first I saw, and I've always loved this film, her personally, and it was always a film, weirdly, that yes, I started to realise over the years how it was quite unpopular. Pretty much everyone that I'd seen it, that I knew, kind of whenever they mentioned it, it was always something that I said, yeah, I love the film. I thought they would probably agree, and they would just kind of look at me weirdly or something, or a couple of people that I knew would say, it's a bad film, it's not a good film, and I was always kind of like, it's interesting. It is for me, it's a film, that I love. I think is a great film, and since ever I kind of started making my lists, which was many, many years ago, favorite films, this was always, among my favorites, and it was always a film that got mentioned there, within my kind of favourite films lists, and it's one of the first Hitchcocks that I saw, and yes, I hadn't seen it for a few years when I rewatched this in 2017, and I watched it twice in that year, and just once again remembering how great this film is, how masterful this film is. This for me, it is very unpopular at times, but I think it's one of the very, very best films that Hitchcock ever made in his career, and it's, some say it's kind of those that do love the film do say, a lot of them do say it's one of his final, if not his final masterpiece or great film. Marnie is even more divisive. That's a film that I don't know what to expect from, really. It seems like a very, very different Hitchcock. It might be quite, it could be unenjoyable. It could be something I love. It could be very intriguing, because I know it's very, very dark and stuff. People have said, but Sean Connery is in that one, and same year as Goldfinger, so it should be really, really interesting. And yes, Tippi Hedren is in this film, The Birds, and she, of course, plays Melanie Daniels. She's basically she's the main character of the film, protagonist, and it was basically her first role, acting role, and yes, in my opinion, she is absolutely wonderful in this film, and really something else actually, especially in the second half. When she becomes more and more kind of unhinged and disturbed by this, of course, a spoilers review, be warned. But yes, this film is just it's such a pleasing, in my opinion, family film. While also being one of the most disturbing and effective horror films of all time. Top 5. If you do consider this a horror, I would put this on a horror list, for example. And yes, this would certainly be my top 5, no doubt. And you just compare it to so many horror films, where in this film, it's just got such great characters. There's no cheap scares, jump scares. This is Hitchcock we're talking about, and it's just one of his very, very purest films, in my opinion. I think it's just perfection from start to finish. What an enjoyable film! What a pleasing film, and a masterfully crafted film. Genius stuff, and full of heart. very unique, kind of his filmography. And yes, about this character of Melanie, who yes, kind of at the beginning scenes, you see her and Rod Taylor's character, Mitch, kind of this romance, developing, kind of frustration in there, very interesting and kind of compelling scene there, and it's kind of this comedy mixed in, and this frustration, and something where a romance develops, in the pet shop, of course, and it sets the tone for the first half mainly, where it's kind of just a pure escapist fantasy at times, and stuff, and romance film. I think it's just really something else. This has got such a dreamlike effect to it once again, like a lot of Hitchcock's films, kind of from well, mainly he did. He kind of developed this kind of style or feeling, the dreamlike qualities. For Rebecca, I feel, and Notorious, I think was his first ones where he kind of started this. He does do some pure thrillers, but these are the ones that have this extra something in them. And of course, Vertigo, just one of the most kind of dreamlike and fantastical films really ever made. And this has got that in there. It's got these qualities, and it is. It's a sci-fi kind of fantasy, of course, and everyone knows the kind of main idea about this film. These birds, unexpected and unexplained throughout the entire film, attacks of these birds at Bodega Bay, and as I say, these two characters meet at the beginning in San Francisco, and he's kind of a defense attorney, and she meets him. He plays a prank on her, and she, well, at the same time, pretends to be kind of working at the pet shop, and it's just a great sequence, hilarious, and just something that really draws me in. I feel this romance, and of course, just one of the smoothest characters in film. Of course, played by Rod Taylor. As Mitch. He really, at times gives Cary Grant, a run for his money with the kind of the smooth, charming character that he plays in this film, and it's so enjoyable. It's off the charts. You just classic, acting here. Charming characters that I just miss. I really do miss, and he's just so good. A very underrated actor, and he's done some voice acting as well. For example, with 101 Dalmatians, and he was great in The Time Machine. Just a great actor, and very underrated for me. He is, at his best here for me. The stuff I've seen from him. He is so good in this film. Just such an enjoyable character. Very complex at times. And just a strong character who kind of, is so likeable. And of course, his whole, what this film becomes is such an involving family film. Very, wonderful exposition, of all these characters. Lydia, who's basically the mother of Mitch, and yes, his sister as well in the film, Kathy. And then, of course, these four main characters, it's about them growing, kind of together throughout this film, eventually being forced, the mother of Lydia, to actually, kind of really kind of get involved in Melanie. And yes, it's just a really wonderful film, while also being, one of the most effective for me personally, and most haunting horror films. This is really scary stuff for me. It plays on our fears, and this is something that, not in itself, kind of most people would be scared of. It's birds, it's everyday kind of birds, crows and stuff, gulls, and of course they start attacking people. And this is, within the first half an hour, really, you just see one instance, a kind of hint, subtle hint at what's to come. You would not expect it, the first time you saw this film, for it to escalate to the level that it does, where there is hundreds, of crows and everything gathered round, and of course chasing and attacking, these residents of Bodega Bay. And yes, you've just got one of the most involving in the first hour, kind of just romances, and you get to know these characters, of Bodega Bay, just even the very kind of minor, what you call very minor side characters, just so memorable. It's one of those films, it's kind of a survival film, and stuff, but one that you care about all these characters, and just every single moment. For me, I'll never forget any of this film. It's always in my mind. All the different kind of the moments, the story beats. It's so, for me, perfectly constructed. And it's just when you rewatch it, it just gets better and better, and you remember once again, you get reminded of all these moments. The character of Annie, it's just it's just such a great character. She's of course just as well the backstory, the exposition to all these side characters is all kind of involved within all the main characters. It's kind of comparable, to the Third Man. Actually, if you've seen that film, you kind of I've studied that film as well, and stuff in books and everything. Where you've got the kind of the branching of all the different character relationships. Not too many, but kind of they all kind of intertwine in many ways, and they all have knock-on effect, and there's always kind of something going on affecting all this, and it's the same in this. There's backstory, there's kind of you could say tension between Annie and Mitch, but again it kind of it affects how Melanie sees things as well, and you've got this playing at the back of your mind, and she finds things out in the film, and it just kind of adds everything so much to these characters. Mitch as well, such a great character, and you learn so much more after the sort of half an hour mark, 45-minute mark, about him and his past, and what happens, of course, as we know, what's happened to the father, and it just turns into a very such a human film. It's really quite emotional undercurrent to this film. Actually, it's not just kind of survival kind of horror film. It's really so well kind of fleshed out characters. They're given such humanity actually, and of course the character of Lydia is great. She really is just someone who is very reluctant at first to Melanie, very kind of not quite sure of her, of course, and you soon learn, as we know, her real her kind of thoughts, and she's just such a great character, and I love personally how it kind of turns out at the end of the film, when they all kind of she accepts Melanie, and it's just such a wonderful, warm film. I love these characters, just all of them. Even, of course, just as I say, some of these side characters, it's so memorable. For example, where Melanie, asks for the name, of Kathy, that store, and it's just the scene that is just so well, so enjoyable. It's such a, kind of a perfectly crafted film. That even the very small, what you'd say, it's kind of just standard scenes you would say in another film. Certainly horror film. Certainly not here. Hitchcock really elevates every single element in this film, and then you've not even got to the fact that this is just one of the purest, representations of many of his themes. It's a family film in many ways. It's kind of more of a, kind of, yes, less abstract, you could say, than something like Vertigo, and it's not, kind of as full-on thriller as a lot of his films. It's kind of a really unique and you could say weird mix of family and kind of horror film, thriller, and kind of melodrama as well. And I love every element in the film. But yes, it's one of the scariest films for me, and just the purity to the way he kind of presents fear. This is genius. This is genius. This film, the way he builds up, this kind of mystery, and most people, of course, as I say, would not be, really in another film buying in maybe to this, birds attacking, these residents. But in this film, the way it's approached, it's just weirdly so believable, and something that, it's never fully explained, right, if it's sticking to the kind of, the elements of the book, apparently, where nothing is explained really at all about the attacks, it just happens. It's so disturbing, and you've got the classic kind of films of sci-fi and horror, especially where people kind of do not believe in something that's happening, something that it's not every day, what you would not believe in usually. You've got this, and you've got the questioning of of this, even when things have birds are attacked, and this is so well done. The scene, in the kind of center of the film where loads of these residents, are in this this location, and in the bar and stuff, and yes, they are all kind of discussing, just the kind of how this would not happen, and you've got the different sides of the argument and stuff, and people believing in it and not believing in it, and it's classic stuff here. You know, the writing, the way this is this is edited is actually masterful. It's so precisely edited, and just, of course, as we know, mostly real birds used, mechanical as well, and you've got the the yellow screen, all of the combination of these mechanicals and actual birds, and the way Hitchcock has this it's very dreamlike, soft focus at times and everything. It makes for one of the most immersive, visceral, but fantastical horror films really, and it just the visual storytelling and the actual effects and the whole way it's all practical, most of it, and just it's just really something else. Actually feel like you're getting attacked as a viewer, by the birds, by the the fear of this, and it's just moments where, of course, they come right up to the camera, and it is just genius stuff. This is one of the most effective horror films, and in that sense, the way it's shot, the editing, the direction, just dipping his toes in here, very comfort directing here. Just easily directing, it seems, but of course it is a very complex, very complex sequences in the film. Such a complex film in the way this is so hard to actually do this, to pull this off. Using real birds and everything, and the stuff that must have gone into that, but it seems like he's just in full control here. Every single element, every single frame of the film it's immaculate, and every single shot, just really is so effective of what Hitchcock is trying to do, the way he controls us as a viewer, and the atmosphere that's created early on, while being one of the most just most enjoyable melodramas at times, romance kind of thing, and he does this geniusly. He knows he has to develop these characters, make us, well, for me at least, care so much about these very it's a small town, of course, by the bay, and it's just something so charming and nostalgic about this town, and Bodega Bay, and the name Bodega Bay as well is something that I never really forgot once I saw the film as a younger individual, and it's just all these elements stick in your mind because it's so effectively told, and yes, the way he builds these characters individually, and the relationship, the chemistry between Tippi Hedren and Rod Taylor is really so strong. It's just perfect in my opinion. And then you've got, of course, just a really wonderful character of Lydia, and the whole relationships here, and the way that she slowly begins to accept this character of Melanie, and you slowly learn more and more about Lydia, and the humanity to her, and the sadness. It is actually a very deep film. This film, despite what some people would probably just view this and say it's a horror film, and it's not. It's just it's a good horror film or something like this, and it's escapism. But I do think there's so much to these characters actually, and it's so deep and personal actually. But really, this is why I care about the film so much. And the second half, of course, you have some of the greatest horror sequences, and they are done in just epic and grand ways. It's treated action scenes, you could say, of course, and yes, of course, the first real occurrence of mass numbers of birds. Not the party scene, but the one after, of course, where Melanie is sitting outside of the school. This is just a genius sequence. I have, of course, studied this scene as well. The way, of course, and it's Hitchcock as a lot of the kids in the school are singing this what you'd see as an annoying song. And I can tell that he had some fun making this one. That scene there. They sing this song for about 2 minutes or so, while in the background you've got the rising in tension, and this combination, I think, of comedy, something that is constantly playing, while you're fully aware that these birds, these crows, are appearing more and more on this apparatus. This is once, of course, Melanie stops looking. You stop seeing the reaction shots, for quite a while, and then you see that crow. Just that final one. The camera lingers on it. It follows the crow. Motivated camera movement there. and it lands, and then you see a vast number of the crows. That is one of the genius sequences, of tension that I've ever seen. And then, of course, that is the reaction shot for the scene, and it's just something that is always shocking. Just the way it is filmed throughout it's so atmospheric, and the use of color in the film is just stunning. This especially looks wonderful. Once I got my 4K TV, because of course even with normal Blu-rays, the colors, the kind of the look of the films, even on Blu-ray, just enhanced so much. The colors just look wonderful to this film. All the greens, it's just wonderful to look at, and there's a real mastery here of the visuals. Hitchcock, of course, was kind of one of the best visual storytellers of all time. Definitely in the top 5. He just knew how to kind of get an idea to the screen, and of course his storyboarding was very unique as well, throughout his filmography, and it's just something that translates to the screen so well. This film is an absolute masterpiece, and that sequence there is just one of the many examples of how he builds tension masterfully, geniusly, and very, very easily, kind of clearly for the viewer to kind of absorb. Just anyone can watch this and kind of get the effect, of the visuals, and it creates ideas in the head. And of course, this is what horror stems from. An idea, fear, and the way this escalates. This just represents for me why it is one of the very, very best horror films, combined with some of the very, very best characters in a horror film. This is, for me, literally, in terms of characters, could be right near the top, right at the top, really, of horror films. Of characters in a horror film, maybe just one or two, maybe another Hitchcock film, above this. And yes, this is just it's just so genius. Of course, the whole massive attack on the town, where you've got these explosions as well. It's just so genius. It's so thrilling, this film, visceral, and you've got the kind of the final haunting, claustrophobic final act, where of course they return to the house, and it's all kind of cut off, and it's a perfect way to end the film. Very kind of ambiguous. You never find out about why these birds attacked. Just it's something that it leaves it wonderfully, how you don't find out. It's kind of a haunted ending, but again, so much has kind of come together in terms of the characters, and the whole way, the arc of Melanie, and Rod Taylor's character of Mitch, and Lydia, finally truly accepting really, and coming to love the character of Melanie. And I would love to have seen what happens after that, but it's left in a wonderful way. Tippi Hedren, in this film, is just so good. She's just a wonderful performance here, and for a kind of early role here, this is something to behold. Actually, it's very, very subtle at times, and she really has a control, has a dignity to her performance, and she becomes a really just such a likable character, and of course, due to her performance as well, it really is something else. Of course, the chemistry, as I've said, some of the other characters, of course, Rod Taylor, his character, it's just really, it works so wonderfully, and the way, of course, as we know, towards the end of the film, she becomes so disturbed, by this. This whole experience, it just adds, to kind of descent into madness, you could say, and her performance, especially towards the end of the film, is really, really something to behold. Actually, it's absolutely stunning, and of course, she's beautiful in the film as well, and just something that's so impressive. Just all the performances in this film are great, but she really does, give one that is among the best performances in a Hitchcock film. For me, I know it's received criticism, performances in this film, but for me personally, I think they're some of the best in Hitchcock films, and Tippi Hedren is just so wonderful here, and just a great protagonist that she plays. And yes, overall, this is just for me one of the finest outings for Alfred Hitchcock, and it's just one of the very best films ever made, in my opinion. This is just one of his purest films for me, and in terms of just so many films, that people talk about, rightfully so, of course. Vertigo, Rear Window, Psycho, all these films, Notorious and stuff. I think, yes, I do, regard these as, especially, Rear Window, Vertigo and stuff, as, some of the very, very finest Hitchcocks, some of the finest films ever made. I do think The Birds is actually among these films, personally. I know it's going to be, very controversial, but that's my opinion, actually. And, yeah, I think I've justified the opinion, for me personally, why I think this in the review. But yes, this is one of my favourite 60 films of all time, actually, and it does receive my absolute highest rating of 100% plus, tier S. This is a magnum opus for me of the genres that Hitchcock was very, very kind of used to here, but something very, very different and very, very just beyond a lot of his works for me. Even just as I say, the emotion to the film, the level of humanity, the tragedy actually of a lot of the characters. Annie, played wonderfully by Suzanne Pleshette. She is great in this film, so great, and such a character, I got so invested in, even though she's kind of, she could have been, used as a kind of someone to get in the way of this romance, but no, this was wonderfully done, and actually, there's such a tragedy when her character dies. It's a real shame. And the moment when she does die, and when you see her body, and then of course Rod Taylor, just that reaction, kind of, oh no, it's so felt. The death of her. It's things like this where the characters are treated with such humanity, and there's also other deaths in the film. For example, where you see the guy with his eyes missing, is really graphic. This is a graphic film, I can see, it's just one of the, it's very, very daring, this film. It's such a bold, piece of cinema, and it is just one of the most enjoyable, most masterfully crafted in all of cinema for me personally. It's not as kind of emotional in ways like Vertigo, and, it's not, kind of, it's not something that, of course, is respected a lot of the time as a lot of his best works, but I personally do feel it's one of his very, very finest, and very close to being his best, by the numbers, of course. I do think the best by far is North by Northwest for me, and my favourite. But yes, there's a couple of ones like this, and Rear Window and Vertigo, and a couple of others that I've not mentioned, which are very, very close, to being just behind that, just behind North by Northwest. And once again, the direction is absolutely flawless. The visual style is absolutely stunning. This puts you in a kind of trance as well through its, its conversations, the dialogue, and the way that just a very relaxed. This is something that you can just put on and feel comforted with. At least I can. Such a comforting film, and it's something that I can just watch. To comfort me, as I say, and very, very pleasing in every area. It's just one of the most satisfying films for me. It's something where I'm fully invested in, and it reels you in. Very, very kind of like Vertigo, you could say. Where Jimmy Stewart, of course, is driving. Early on, he's just driving. He's just looking. His obsession beginning to grow, but it's kind of like that where you see Melanie kind of traveling and stuff, and asking very, very, what you could say is very just basic questions and everything, but it's so it's elevated so high that it's just so invested, and it becomes part of the language to the film. It's very, very basic moments. He elevates everything, the mundane, what you could say is mundane, and just makes it for one of the most epic events in cinema. These birds, everyday birds, crows and everything, gulls, are attacking this small bay, and it becomes one of the grandest, most thrilling events in cinema for me. So it's a magnum opus for sure. I think every element is just really at the highest order here, and Hitchcock is rarely ever been better than what he was. With this film, I think he absolutely directed his film to perfection, and I think in terms of just the representation of fear, and I think this is one of the very, very most effective films. One of the very best horrors in my top 5 for sure, and one of my favourite romances, is Melanie and Mitch. It's got the kind of all the classic, kind of feel good survival elements to the film, where these characters come together, and you've got a wonderful, wonderful romance, and as I say, this family, becomes so warm as the film goes on, and true heart to the film. I think really one of Hitchcock's most human films, actually, and yeah, not just a kind of standard horror film that really unfortunately gets really overlooked. I think this film, personally, and I think yes, it's just always been one of my favourite films, and yeah, it's just into my top 60 for sure. This definitely gets the tier S, and no doubts, it just it's one of the very best films ever made, in my opinion. I think it's just in every area just so enjoyable. This is epic. It's romantic. It's just thoroughly human. This is a horror film, a thriller, where I'm fully invested in these characters and the relationships. Just the way the characters developed throughout the film, and yeah, just as I say, the kind of blend between reality and fantasy. The fantastical feel that it has, the dreamlike qualities that actually, if you look, certainly are there. Certainly in the visuals and the way he puts you in a trance. I feel once again, and the very relaxed feel that it has at times as well plays into that. It kind of catches you off guard, and then you've got the very visceral. The combination of a very dreamlike and kind of subdued and relaxed feel, combined with the harsh, very raw, very raw feelings you get, just attacked by these birds. Literally, coming right up to the camera. Cinematic perfection, in my opinion. And yes, I look forward to doing more Hitchcock reviews, as I have been for quite a while now on YouTube. One of my very 5 favourite directors. Absolute genius, and this film is stunning. A stunning magnum opus for me. And I might watch Marnie next, actually, as my next Hitchcock review on YouTube. So yes, really looking forward to doing that. And yes, tell me your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching my review.